Question 1. A financial firm is building a serverless API using AWS Lambda, API Gateway, and DynamoDB. Sensitive financial transactions must be encrypted. The API should only be accessed by authorized applications. Lambda should not have public internet access. What is the most secure architecture? Options: A. Use API Gateway with IAM authentication and encrypt data at rest in DynamoDB. B. Expose Lambda via a public API gateway and enable WAF for security. C. Deploy Lambda inside a VPC and use a private API gateway endpoint. D. Use Lambda authorizers with Cognito and enable CloudFront caching. Correct answer: C. Deploy Lambda inside a VPC and use a private API gateway endpoint. Explanation: placing Lambda in a VPC isolates it from public internet threats. Private API gateway endpoints ensure only VPC resources can access it. This is the most secure architecture for sensitive financial data. Why not other options? Option A. IAM authentication helps but does not restrict API gateway access. Option B. WAF protects against attacks but does not enforce private network access. Option D. Cognito is useful for authentication but does not secure Lambda from internet exposure. Question 2. A media company processes TBs of video files daily using Amazon EC2 and stores them in S3. They want to reduce EC2 costs while maintaining performance. The workload is batch processing, and completion time is flexible. No persistent storage is required after processing. What is the best cost-optimized solution? Options: A. Use EC2 spot instances with auto-scaling for batch jobs. B. Migrate the workload to AWS Lambda for cost savings. C. Use AWS Batch with on-demand instances. D. Deploy EC2 instances with reserved instances for cost reduction. Correct answer: A. Use EC2 spot instances with auto-scaling for batch jobs. Explanation: spot instances offer up to 90% cost savings for non-time-sensitive batch jobs. Auto-scaling ensures the right number of instances are running at any time. Why not other options? Option B. Lambda is not designed for heavy video processing due to memory and execution limits. Option C. AWS Batch with on-demand instances is more expensive than spot instances. Option D. Reserved instances are better for predictable workloads, not batch jobs. Question 3. A SaaS company hosts a multi-tenant application on AWS. Each tenant needs isolated data storage. The database should be highly scalable and cost-effective. Operational overhead should be minimal. Which database strategy is the best fit? Options: A. Use a single RDS instance with separate schemas for each tenant. B. Deploy RDS multi-AZ with a separate database instance per tenant. C. Use Amazon DynamoDB with a partition key for each tenant. D. Use Amazon Redshift with isolated schemas for each tenant. Correct answer: C. Use Amazon DynamoDB with a partition key for each tenant. Explanation: DynamoDB scales automatically and provides tenant isolation via partition keys. It eliminates the need for managing separate RDS instances per tenant. Highly cost-effective for multi-tenant architectures. Why not other options? Option A. A single RDS instance limits scalability and has high contention risks. Option B. Multi-AZ RDS per tenant increases operational costs. Option D. Redshift is designed for analytics, not transactional workloads. Question 4. A global financial firm has multiple AWS accounts and uses AWS organizations for centralized management. They run APIs on Amazon API Gateway in Account A. Applications in Account B need access to the private APIs. APIs must not be exposed to the public internet. Which solution provides the most secure and scalable architecture? Options: A. Use VPC peering between Account A and Account B and route traffic through a private API gateway endpoint. B. Use AWS Private Link to expose the private API gateway endpoint to Account B. C. Use a public API gateway with IAM authentication to restrict access. D. Deploy API gateway in both accounts and sync data using Lambda. Correct answer. B. Use AWS private link to expose the private API gateway endpoint to account. B. Explanation. AWS private link allows secure communication across accounts without exposing APIs to the internet. It prevents unnecessary VPC peering complexity and ensures controlled access. Traffic stays within the AWS network, enhancing security and performance. Why not other options? Option A. VPC peering does not support transitive connections, making scalability difficult. Option C. Using a public API gateway increases the risk of unauthorized access. Option D. Deploying separate API gateways in each account increases operational complexity. Question 5. A media company stores terabytes of raw video footage in S3. Videos are rarely accessed after 90 days but must be retained for 3 years. The company wants to minimize storage costs. Retrieval times of up to 12 hours are acceptable. Which S3 storage class provides the best cost savings? Options: A. S3 Standard Infrequent Access, S3 Standard IA. B. S3 Intelligent Tiering. C. S3 Glacier Deep Archive. D. S3 One Zone Infrequent Access, S3 One Zone IA. Correct answer: C. S3 Glacier Deep Archive. Explanation. S3 Glacier Deep Archive is the cheapest option for long-term cold storage. It offers the lowest storage cost with retrieval times between 12 to 48 hours. Why not other options? Option A. S3 Standard IA is more expensive than Glacier Deep Archive for long-term storage. Option B. Intelligent tiering optimizes costs for unpredictable access, but this scenario has predictable cold storage needs. Option D. S3 One Zone IA lacks redundancy and is not ideal for critical data retention. Question 6. An e-commerce company serves customers globally using Amazon EC2 and RDS MySQL in S East 1. Traffic surges during Black Friday sales. The application must remain available even if S East 1 fails. Database rights should be consistent across all regions. Which architecture ensures the highest availability? Options: A. Use an RDS multi-AZ deployment with read replicas in another region. B. Migrate to Amazon Aurora Global Database with automatic failover. C. Deploy an RDS cluster in each region and sync data using AWS DMS. D. Use an EC2 instance with a self-managed MySQL database and replicate using S3. Correct answer: B. Migrate to Amazon Aurora Global Database with automatic failover. Explanation. Aurora Global Database replicates data across regions with a 1-second lag. Failover is automated, ensuring high availability and consistency. It provides better performance than manually syncing RDS databases. Why not other options? Option A. RDS read replicas improve read performance but do not provide automatic failover. Option C. AWS DMS is not ideal for real-time replication across active workloads. Option D. Self-managed MySQL increases operational overhead and is less reliable. Question 7. A large enterprise runs thousands of EC2 instances across multiple AWS accounts. Instances must be regularly patched for security compliance. Patches should be deployed automatically, minimizing downtime. Administrators need visibility into patch status. Which AWS service provides the best solution? Options: A. Use AWS Systems Manager Patch Manager to automate patching. B. Manually update instances via SSH and use CloudWatch to track updates. C. Create an auto-scaling group that replaces instances every week with a new AMI. D. Use AWS config to detect outdated instances and notify admins to update manually. Correct answer: A. Use AWS Systems Manager Patch Manager to automate patching. Explanation. AWS Systems Manager Patch Manager automatically applies security patches based on policies. It minimizes manual intervention and provides patch compliance reports. Supports scheduled maintenance windows to reduce downtime. Why not other options? Option B, manually patching via SSH is inefficient at scale. Option C, replacing instances weekly is expensive and unnecessary. Option D, AWS config only detects compliance issues, it does not apply patches automatically. Question 8. A pharmaceutical company stores sensitive drug research data in Amazon S3. Only specific users should have access based on IAM roles. Data should never be exposed to the public. Encryption at rest and in transit is mandatory. Which solution ensures maximum security? Options: A. Use IAM policies to restrict access and enable S3 default encryption. B. Make the S3 bucket private and whitelist trusted IP addresses using a bucket policy. C. Use AWS WAF to filter requests and block unauthorized access. D. Create a VPC endpoint for S3 and only allow access from internal VPC resources. Correct answer: D. Create a VPC endpoint for S3 and only allow access from internal VPC resources. Explanation: S3 VPC endpoints ensure that data never travels over the public internet. IAM policies combined with VPC endpoints create a highly secure architecture. Why not other options? Option A, IAM policies help, but without a VPC endpoint, data might still be accessible over the internet. Option B, IP-based restrictions are not as scalable or secure as VPC endpoints. Option C, AWS WAF protects web applications but does not restrict S3 access at the network level. Question 9. A global enterprise with multiple AWS accounts wants to centralize authentication while ensuring least privilege access to employees. Users should log in using corporate credentials. Permissions should be role-based, not account-wide. The solution must be scalable and comply with security best practices. Which solution provides the best approach? Options: A. Use IAM users in each AWS account and assign roles individually. B. Use AWS IAM Identity Center, AWS SSO, with AWS organizations. C. Create a Lambda function to synchronize IAM policies across accounts. D. Use an external identity provider, IDP, and manage permissions in the IDP. Correct answer: B. Use AWS IAM Identity Center, AWS SSO, with AWS organizations. Explanation: AWS IAM Identity Center allows users to log in with corporate credentials and provides role-based access across multiple AWS accounts. It integrates well with AWS organizations, ensuring centralized authentication. Why not other options? Option A, managing IAM users in each account is cumbersome and does not scale well. Option C, using Lambda to sync IAM policies across accounts is complex and prone to errors. Option D, external IDPs work but require additional integration efforts and do not offer native AWS role-based access management. Question 10, a media streaming platform needs to improve performance for global users. Users access video metadata stored in a NoSQL database. Frequent reads occur from multiple AWS regions. The solution must minimize latency and be cost-effective. Which service should be used to optimize performance? Options: A. Use Amazon ElastiCache, Redis, as a caching layer. B. Deploy an Amazon RDS instance with read replicas in each region. C. Use DynamoDB global tables with DAX for caching. D. Implement an Amazon S3 bucket with cross-region replication. Correct answer: C. Use DynamoDB global tables with DAX for caching. Explanation: DynamoDB global tables ensure multi-region data replication, and DAX, DynamoDB Accelerator, provides in-memory caching to reduce read latency. Why not other options? Option A, ElastiCache is great for caching but does not solve multi-region replication efficiently. Option B, RDS read replicas introduce replication lag and increased costs for a NoSQL workload. Option D, S3 is good for static content but is not suited for real-time metadata lookups.